I've been saying for a long time that we're headed for what I call the Greater Depression. That's a period of time when most people's standard of living will drop significantly. And right now we're on the razor's edge of something very, very bad happening to the economy. I don't like to say things like that because it doesn't make you popular. It scares people. What's the point of that? But the fact is that governments, and governments are primarily in back of all the problems we have done many, many stupid things over many, many years, and the chickens are coming home to roost.
Hello and welcome back to Soar Financially, where we discuss the macro to understand the micro. My name is Kai Hoffman. I'm the @JR Mining Guy on Twitter and your host for this conversation because we'll be joined here by Doug Casey. He's a best-selling author, renowned speculator, and I think the perfect guest for discussing the macro and understanding the micro because we're trying to understand what is happening in the world and what is driving our commodity prices, what is driving mining stocks. Why are the mining stocks, for example, not moving while gold is trading at all-time high levels? We're going to get to the bottom of this and see what Doug's perspective on that is, of course, as well. But before I switch over to my guest, very brief reminder, hit that subscribe button. It helps us out tremendously, increase our reach and reach like-minded investors, educate and inform, of course, as well. Now, without much further ado, I'm looking forward to introducing Doug Casey here on the screen. First-time guest on Soar Financially. Doug, it's great to see you. Thank you so much for making the time.
It's a pleasure, Carl. Thank you.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, no, love to have you on. And as I said, you're the perfect guest to discuss the macro and then help us understand the micro, of course, as well. But let's start at the macro. Let's set the scene here a little bit. What's the current state of the economy, Doug, and how strong, how healthy is it?
Well, look, I've been saying for a long time that we're headed for what I call the Greater Depression. That's a period of time when most people's standard of living will drop significantly. And right now we're on the razor's edge of something very, very bad happening to the economy. I don't like to say things like that because it doesn't make you popular. It scares people. What's the point of that? But the fact is that governments, and governments are primarily in back of all the problems we have done many, many stupid things over many, many years, and the chickens are coming home to roost. And that's why, essentially, I've always been a fan of gold. I've been a gold buyer ever since 1971, and it's been reasonably good to me because I've used it as a savings vehicle more than a speculative vehicle, although from time to time it's been a great speculative vehicle. But the thing with gold is that it's the only financial asset that's not simultaneously somebody else's liability. Well, Bitcoin is moving into that space now too, and I've been a supporter of Bitcoin since 2017, a little bit of a late adopter, but that's kind of the overview, the bottom line.
No, fantastic. Awesome. Really appreciate you setting the scene. And I think we need to get a bit more granular, really work out like where did the government go wrong? And of course, like what does the Greater Depression scenario look like as well? So let's start maybe on the government side and the political side here as well, maybe monetary and fiscal side as well. What were the biggest missteps here, Doug?
Well, look, 100 years ago, all the governments of the world, or any of the governments in the world, only took 5 or 10% at most of their economies. Now, most governments are up to the 40, 50, or 60% level. And the state, as an institution, has become an overweening influence in the economy and in most people's private lives. And I think that that's a very bad and destructive thing. There's 2 ways that you can relate with your fellow man, coercively or voluntarily. And the problem with the state is it institutionalizes coercion. I believe in free minds and free markets. So one of the problems with all the distortions, distortions are in the way the economy works is one of the problems with having a huge amount of state intervention. This takes place through their taxes, where they confiscate the things you produce directly, and more subtly through inflation. where they can print up, as they're doing, trillions of new currency units and spend them where they want, as opposed to where you may want. And by the time the dollars filter down to you, they're worth a lot less. And what do they buy with all this taxation and inflation? Lots of regulations. And regulations tell you what you must do or must not do. And they reduce the amount of real production in the world. So let's put it this way. Your enemy is the state, no matter what country you live in.
Okay, no, fair enough, of course, and I think the whole momentum accelerated over the last 3, maybe 5 years, in particular as well, because money printing has completely exploded, of course, to unreasonable levels here as well. Is that why you're saying the chickens are coming home to roost now? Like, and what could trigger that as well? Like, what could set off the barbecue here, Doug, for lack of a better term?
Right. It's funny. I've been to Haiti many times over the years, and it's finally making front page news. Okay. Look, one manifestation of all of this is the amount of debt in the world that governments own, that corporations, individuals owe. The whole world revolves around debt. In fact, even the dollar, whether we're talking, or euro, or whatever currency we're talking about, they're all debt-based currencies. And the problem with debt is, in itself, debt is fine if it comes from real savings and it's being used for productive purposes to make more wealth. But most debt today is actually consumer debt. All government debt is consumer debt. And most private debt is consumer debt. And what does that mean? When you borrow money, you're taking capital that somebody else has saved over the past and using it, or you're mortgaging your future where you're going to pay it back sometime down the road. And the problem when there's a lot of debt is that it can become a daisy chain. When one person defaults on his debt, the next person can't pay off, the next person can't pay off. And there are hundreds of trillions of dollars worth of debt in the world today. So it's an unstable situation. So I don't know what the catalyst, the exact catalyst that's going to set off the depression is going to be. We've had a gradual depression since 1971, when even the government statistics show that the average guy's standard of living, after taxes, after inflation, has been dropping. Will we have another 1929 style event? It's entirely possible.
Absolutely. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about that daisy chain of events here real quick as well. If you had to make a guesstimate as to what could trigger it, I know you mentioned like it's tough to put a finger on it, but if you were a betting man, what would be the highest payout that you would get, or like where would you put your money right now? Is it maybe commercial real estate? Is it the mortgage and maybe the private lending business? Is like where could it be?
Well, it wouldn't be real estate, because the problem with real estate is that it floats on a sea of debt. And you can't buy it, or nobody does, buy it or sell it, either one, without financing. So it's not a cash market. Incidentally, down here in Buenos Aires, where I am right now, it is a cash market. So if I wanted to buy commercial real estate, I'd buy it right here in this city. Because in this city, Buenos Aires, it's a huge city, it's 15 million people at least, there's no debt, frankly. Everything is done for cash. So prices are much lower than they are other places in the world. And also here in Argentina, we've had a historic change, a huge change in the government with the election of Javier Milei, who's a proclaimed anarcho-capitalist. would like to abolish the state. So I'm a big supporter of him. I think Argentina is going to boom in the future. Anyway, that's a little bit of a tangent. No, in most of the world, I have zero interest in commercial real estate. Or frankly, look, real estate's been very, very good to me over the years, but I have no interest in that. No interest in the stock market in general. What am I interested in? I continue to buy gold because it's the only financial asset that's not simultaneously somebody else's liability. And governments in particular are going to find is they don't accept each other's fiat currencies backed by nothing. I think the world is going to go back to gold, and that can only happen at much higher prices than we have today. So I'm a gold bull. I've always been a gold bug, insofar as a gold bug is somebody who believes that gold, for physical reasons, not just historical reasons, makes the best possible money. But I'm also a gold bull and have been, and I believe I'll continue to be for some time.
We'll break that down in a second as well, because I'm really curious, like what's driving gold prices higher. But since you brought up Argentina and Javier Milei, I'm curious. Like one thing he wants to do is get Argentina back on the U.S. dollar, of course. And I do want to talk with you about the U.S. dollar and the role of the U.S. dollar in the grand scheme of things, like global world economy here, and the role as the world reserve currency. Like, Doug, how strong is that U.S. dollar then right now?
Well, it's the healthiest horse on the way to the slaughterhouse, quite frankly. People that are keeping most of their wealth in dollars are making a big mistake. Look, it's a fiat currency where most of what the U.S. government spends now, or about half of it anyway, doesn't come from taxing their population, their subjects. It comes from printing up new dollars. And this is going to result in much higher levels of inflation in the future. So for that reason, I wouldn't touch bonds either with a barge pole. I'll use them as a speculative vehicle from time to time. So I'm very interested, always have been, but especially now in commodities, and not just gold, not just silver, but you can make a very good bull case for uranium, for copper, for nickel, for many commodities at this point. It's a better place to speculate, and everything is a speculation today. Investment, which is putting a unit of capital someplace in order to create more capital. It's like planting a seed of corn in order to get a bushel of corn. That's what investing is all about. But investing is harder and harder today because the economy is more and more state controlled. It makes it unpredictable, it makes it unstable. So whether you like the idea or not, you're almost being forced to be a speculator by the government's inflation, primarily, but also by its taxation and its regulation.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Is that why we're seeing a move away from fiat currencies in general? Like the talk of a gold-backed currency potentially out of the BRICS, for example, is still making rounds. It's a little hotter, a little colder rumor here from time to time, depending on when a meeting is coming up here of the BRICS. I'm curious, like, is that something you see happening again, like a gold-backed currency, for example?
Well, let me go back to what you said earlier. Milei does not want to see the economy dollarized. What he really wants to see is people use whatever they wish, whatever works for a medium of exchange. And the dollar is the best medium of exchange right now in the world. The Argentine peso is not, never has been. But all of these currencies in the world, including the BRICS currencies, have the same problem. They're all fiat currencies. And one of the nice things about the Bitcoin revolution that we're experiencing is that in the past, gold bugs like myself used to refer to the dollar as a fiat currency, but that was meaningless to most people because the dollar is supposed to be sound as a dollar. Dollar's as good as gold. So we called the dollar a fiat currency. It didn't mean much. But as Bitcoin developed, now everybody calls it a fiat currency, and they understand that. So Bitcoin is kind of a very friendly associate of gold from that point of view. But you're not going to see China and Russia come up with a common gold-backed currency. Why? Because they don't trust each other. In fact, why is a currency needed? A currency is a certificate issued by a government. In the past, before 1933, you used gold as a currency. You didn't have to have a middleman. You didn't have to have a central bank, a government, stand in between you and the actual asset. So, yeah, I think the world will go back to gold itself, and hopefully we won't have currencies. Because you've got to remember, the dollar, the pound, the franc, the mark, these were just names for specific amounts of gold. And that distinction has been totally lost. People have forgotten that's what it was. And they think that the phony paper spewed out by central banks is money. It's not. They're going to be sadly disappointed. But no, the Russians and the Chinese are not going to have a common currency because they don't trust each other, and with good reason.
No, absolutely. And throw India there as well. Like there's three people at the table that don't really like talking to each other, although they're sort of aligned because they had to get together to fight the West, right?
That's right.
So,
That's right. And they certainly don't want to use the IOU of a bankrupt government to trade between themselves, which they do now because it's convenient, but they don't want to because these transfers that occur internationally all clear through New York. And as the Russians recently found, that's really dangerous because if the US government, which is run by Jacobins today, decides that they don't like you, they'll steal your assets.
and they'll use them as collateral for other investments as well, apparently.
Yes.
So they'll issue bonds backed by stolen assets. So really, really interesting topic there. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole, but I want to throw in one more topic here into the discussion is sort of accelerating the decay of fiat currencies. Are CBDCs sort of an accelerator? Are they like a catalyst for maybe, gold in particular?
Yeah, CBDCs, central bank digital currencies, they're obviously being imposed on the world. And they're, from the point of view of the average guy, they're going to be a catastrophe. They're monstrous. It means that all of your liquid wealth, your dollars, are digital, which means that they're completely controlled by the state. And well, in Canada, for instance, just recently, the Canadian truckers found that if you have digital assets, you may not have digital assets. So a lot of Canadian truckers were being treated within Canada the way Russia is being treated internationally. Now, I'm completely opposed to central bank digital currencies. Nothing wrong with representing gold with computer digits in a free market banking system, but that's not what we're talking about. I guess the average guy will roll over and use his CBDCs, though, because it seems convenient to be able to pay for things with your iPhone or whatever it is. But it's very
We're already doing that, right? So
we already are, yes. It's very dangerous, and it's potentially disastrous for your personal financial health and your personal freedom as well, because if you don't have any money, or if you can't use the money that you have, you don't have any freedom. You can't go anywhere. You can't do anything. You can't buy anything. You become a veritable serf. And most people in the West today, although we have very high standards of living, we're actually every day turning more and more into serfs where we need to ask permission for what we do.
Oh, and definitely don't want that. Trust me. Like I don't need permission to go hop on a plane to go somewhere on a business trip, or even take the family on vacation. So that's the last thing I want, right? lots of interesting points you brought up
Oh,
there,
that's
Doug, as
that's
well.
right. And it's not just that. You might need several levels of permission, like you might have to have your COVID documents in addition to your passport and your visa, and who knows what'll be next.
No, I don't want to go back to that period. That was really, really frightening. But it was easy. It was interesting to see how easily people adopted and just accepted facts that
Oh
were
yeah,
created, right? So
absolutely.
it's interesting how that
The
the whole story is
average person
unraveling
rolls.
today as well.
Yep, you're right. The average person just rolls over like a whipped dog and wets himself while he's on the ground. Please, sir, may I have more?
That's exactly what we've seen, and people are just happy going back as well. It's insane. Um, we need to talk about Bitcoin versus gold, Doug. I'm not sure if it is a versus, but is Bitcoin taking away from gold, and how mutually beneficial is that relationship?
Oh, it's very symbiotic, actually. I was a late adopter of Bitcoin because I look at the 5 reasons that Aristotle laid down in the 4th century BC, or the 5 characteristics, I should say, of a sound money. It has to be durable. Yeah. Uh, Bitcoin is as durable as gold, actually, as long as computer networks exist. It has to be divisible. Yeah, totally. It has to be convenient. Yeah, as long as you have your iPhone with you. It has to be durable, divisible, convenient, consistent. The problem with Bitcoin that I had was that what was the use value of it? You could get stuck with it. All it is just a digital entry. But the good thing about Bitcoin is that, especially in today's highly politicized world, it allows you to take your wealth across borders quickly and cheaply and easily. And that's a disadvantage of gold. If your gold is in one place, you have to move it with you. And that can be expensive or inconvenient if the state doesn't like the idea. So I'm very glad Bitcoin's caught on. I'm a big believer in Bitcoin. And what's happening is that they're not antagonists. They're both excellent ways to preserve your liquid wealth and get out of the dollar. So Bitcoiners are looking at gold, are discovering it as they discover economics a bit more. And gold bugs are looking at Bitcoin and seeing its advantages. So it's they're complementary.
Well, for in the gold space, and I've been looking at the World Gold Council numbers and the flow of like who's buying gold, who's selling gold right now, and there's no generalist buying. Of course, it's the central banks buying gold, which is really interesting, mostly in the East. We can talk about that in a second as well. But also the ETFs are actually selling gold right now. So the generalists, like the retail investors, are not buying. I think even bullion sales are down a bit. I'm not sure if the price tag of $2,200 is too high for many. Just even what do you call it, symbolically, right? But do you see those generalist investors maybe investing more into Bitcoin and not pushing gold higher there?
Well, look, I think you ought to have both in your portfolio, quite frankly. As far as who's buying gold, it is interesting that these non-Western central banks are buying it. And the reason that they're buying gold is because most of the assets of most of the central banks in the world have always been in dollars. And they realize that dollars are, in effect, hot potatoes, and they want to get rid of them. So what are they going to buy for their central bank reserves? Don't want to own dollars. Makes no sense to own rubles or yuan or drachma, all these phony baloney currencies. So yeah, that's why they're buying. That's why they're buying gold. They're starting to understand that gold has historically always been used as money because its physical characteristics just make it the best money. When will the retail public catch on to this? Well, right now they're very enthralled with the stock market. they're day trading options and all kinds of crazy things that they don't understand. But at some point, they're going to realize I'd like to have some real money in my hot climbing little hand, as opposed to just a digital entry in some faraway computer account. Well, that's a fault with Bitcoin, of course, in a way. But yeah, I think the public is going to get the bit in its teeth at some point. Anyway, the public never buys things when things are cheap. Historically, the public only buys things when it's on the front covers of all the magazines and everybody's talking about it at cocktail parties and this type of thing. So that's when the public will really move into gold. And I'd point out that the all-time high for gold was actually set back in 1980 at $850 an ounce. And in real terms, what is that? That's 3,000, 3,200, 3,500, depending on how you want to massage and trust the government's figures on currency debasement. So yes, just to get back to its previous highs, which was set during a crisis, and we're headed for a much bigger crisis than the one we had in the early 80s now. So yeah, gold is going a lot higher. And at that point, the public is going to jump in, as they always do. And at that point, I hope I find something that's really cheap, that I really like. Maybe it'll be Berkshire Hathaway for all I know. And I can sell I'll sell all my gold stocks and some of my gold for productive assets that yield dividends.
Let's talk about something really cheap as well. And you brought up the gold stocks and the mining stocks. They are extremely cheap, and we have to talk about that disconnect as well. Like, well, why is sentiment in the mining stocks and the Explorer Co's in particular so divergent from the gold price? As I said, like we're trading at 22.12 gold right now per ounce, but the mining stocks are trading like we're back at $1,200 or even below $1,000. Right? There's zero interest. Is it really just the AI craze that's taking away from it, which I'm starting to find really, really hard to believe?
Well, why is it? It's the biggest disconnect between the two in history. There's no question about that. And by all measures, gold stocks are really, really cheap. They're bargains right now. Gold mining as a business is a crappy business, frankly. It's not like in the days of Deadwood, that fantastic series that was on a few years ago, where if you found gold, you were going to be a multimillionaire and your problems were over. It's nothing like that anymore. It's a crappy 19th century choo-choo train business, and nobody likes it for good reasons. The greenies, the environmentalists who are, captured the psyche of most of the Western world, they hate mining. The big fund managers like BlackRock and all the rest of them, mining is not very ESG or DEI compliant. So they feel that they can't own these mining stocks. They're dirty, they're raping Mother Earth, they're exploiting the natives. I mean, they can't or don't feel they can own these mining stocks. So I think it's just a matter of psychology. But at some point in the near future, people will find that if you don't have metals which come out of mines in the ground, when you flip the light switch, it won't go on. So we're headed towards a real crisis from a fundamental point of view that way. But the psychology of the market will change. And when people finally decide, oh, these gold stocks aren't cheap and gold is interesting, I'm going to buy some, it's going to be like trying to jam the contents of Hoover Dam through a garden hose. They're going to be explosive. Because in the past, since the late 60s, when I started watching these things, and when I got some money investing in them, speculating in them, I should say, the market as a whole for gold, little gold stocks, exploration stocks, developers, has moved upwards 10 to 1. And I've personally been in two stocks that went 1,000 to 1. That's hard to believe. 1,000 to 1 in just a couple of years. It's happened in the past. It'll happen again. I'm pretty confident of that.
Absolutely. No, it as well. I was just looking up for some reason you mentioned Hoover Dam. I was just looking up the water levels of Hoover Dam and curious if that was a good analogy here because water levels at Hoover Dam were historically low, but we've had some massive snow and rain in the US. So curious if the liquidity is back in the Hoover Dam there, Doug. So it's, yeah, thought that was interesting.
But listen, it's great. Along with this huge dose of gloom and doom that I'm giving you to have a cheery note. It's good to hear.
No, it's just like that's where my mind went, right? Because the area in Nevada has been abnormally dry. So I'm curious if that's been replenished. So, Doug, a couple things I want to follow up on. You mentioned also copper and uranium, and I want to talk about copper first. Because if the Great Depression or a Greater Depression hits us, like what is copper going to do, and what is the copper price telling you actually right now, where it is trading?
Well, okay, is copper cheap or dear? It's a marginal business. I mean, there aren't any copper miners that are making money hand over fist. And if you go back 50 years, copper was trading, back when gold was trading at $35 or $42, whichever number you want to pick, copper was trading at like 30 cents. So it's gone up, but it's not overpriced. It's not expensive. One of the main reasons why some people like copper a lot is because of the electrification of the world. Will electronic vehicles like the Tesla, if that's going to happen, you're going to need gigantic amounts of copper, not just to build the Teslas and other electronic vehicles, but the extra power that they're going to consume. You're going to have to build lots of generators and transmission lines, and these things all take copper. So, yeah, there's reason. I'm not terribly bullish about electronic vehicles. I think that's a whole different argument. We can talk about the pros and cons about them, and I'm on the fence about EVs and the electrification of the world. But copper, it's like gold or like any mineral, quite frankly. All the easy to find high-grade deposits in the world have basically been discovered. Basically, easy to find stuff, low-hanging fruit. It's all been discovered. And the trouble is it's just like gold. If you find a copper deposit today, or a gold deposit, doesn't matter. It used to be you'd put the thing into production lickety-split right away. Now it'll take you 10 years to get the permitting and to pay off the NGOs and to get the natives on your side. And it's going to be a low-grade gold deposit or a low-grade copper deposit. And that means huge capital investment and moving gigantic amounts of earth. And nobody wants a mine in their backyard. Well, at least they say. So, yeah, there's going to be a shortage of copper in the future, or most industrial minerals for that matter, because, the ex-hippies that are running the world today really want to go back to grubbing for roots and berries. They hate people. They hate industrial development, just in principle. It's the way their minds work. So building a big mine today is extremely risky. And the only kind of mines you can build are giant low-grade mines.
that are super expensive, low IRRs, of course. So in jurisdictions that are also tricky, looking at Pakistan, like what Barrick is doing as well. So you have to go to those places to get anything done, I guess, right?
You're exactly right. You're exactly right. So the current price of stocks reflects the low price of the commodities and how hard it is for them to put these things into production. So, but this is true across the whole commodity space. There are a lot of oil companies and natural gas companies that are selling for 3, 4, 5 times earnings and have significant dividend yields. I mean, we're talking upwards of 10%. Coal is even worse. A lot of coal miners that are selling for 2 or 3 times earnings with even bigger dividend yields. This is an indication that the market's very, very cheap, that nobody wants these stocks. They don't care that you can get 15% in current dividends with the prospect that the stock could go up 10 for 1. They're just too afraid or too psychologically poisoned against the raw material to want to own the stocks. Well, most of what I own is in the natural resource space, these various things we've just mentioned.
No, absolutely. But don't we see the pendulum starting to swing the other way now as well? I just read an article or saw an article, I think in Financial Times or so, that funds have been withdrawn, or massive amounts of funds are being withdrawn from BlackRock. I think it was like $13.3 billion, because people are the fund managers just fed up with their ESG policies, right? So, and that money needs reallocating. Do you see that money eventually flowing into our sector of the commodity space as well? Also as a big FU, maybe?
Yeah, I think so. I think you're exactly right. Reality exists. I mean, you can deny reality, but not for too long. So I ask myself, how did BlackRock come out of nowhere to become this? It used to be they talked about Goldman Sachs as the vampire squid, but BlackRock is like the Kraken eating the vampires. It's crazy, and the values that these people put forward are actually insane. They're so destructive. So yeah, I think the pendulum will swing back to reality. I mean, stupidity, you can be stupid for a while, but you can't be stupid forever. And these people actually are stupid. It's, I have to define the word. It's not that they lack IQ intelligence, of course. They're quite clever. But I define stupidity in this case as an unwitting tendency to self-destruction. That's the kind of stupidity that these people are imposing on the world.
I think where
The
there's some.
whole woke thing. This is woke gone big. I mean, everything about wokeism is a corrupt disaster. But everybody thinks it's great today. Everybody. I don't know who everybody is, but if you listen to the media, you think that's the case.
No, absolutely. Do you see maybe the uranium market as a first sign of cracks in the system? Because it was like you brought up the hippies back in the 70s. It was the worst thing that could have been done, and now all of a sudden, even the Green Party in Germany is starting to talk positively about maybe nuclear reactors, nuclear energy being part of the energy mix here, even.
Yeah, the world is going to nuclear power. There's no question about it. All this stuff with wind and solar, it's actually stupid. It's insane. I'm not against wind and solar. I think they make sense in remote locations and special situations. Sure, of course, there's nothing wrong with it. But you can't power an advanced industrial civilization on wind and solar. They're uneconomic. And when you do things that are uneconomic, it means that you're going to get poorer over the long run. That's going to happen. So yes, nuclear power is without question the safest and the cheapest and the cleanest form of mass power generation. And places like China and India and places that have not been conquered by the woke meme are going into these things massively, and I think the West will too, eventually. And that means we're going to need a lot more uranium. And if you want to find and build a uranium mine, it takes you a decade to put it into production. So there's going to be a real price squeeze for uranium at some point. I'm very bullish on uranium and uranium stocks.
Well, there aren't too many to pick from anyway, so
No,
a very small space, right?
I remember the most recent uranium boom. There were uranium booms in the 1950s, and then there was, this is nothing new, but the last uranium boom was about early 2000s, and back in those days, 23 years ago or something, there were a half a dozen uranium stocks out there. And by the time the boom ended, 2006 or something like that, there were 400 or 500 companies that had uranium in their names, stock promotions basically. And that's the only uranium they had, was in their name on their stock certificates. Well, we're again at the bottom, and now's a good time to buy uranium stocks. Yeah, there's going to be another boom in uranium stocks, along with all these other metals we've been talking about.
No, absolutely. And I fully agree with you on that as well. The world needs nuclear, cheap energy. It can't be like California where they tell you not to plug in your car at night to charge. So that's just not feasible, right? It just does not make any sense. Doug, very last question, and trying to put a positive spin on the whole like doom and gloom discussion we've had. It's something we cannot get away from here on this channel, because it is reality. It is fact. Everything's pointing that way. But one last question to maybe offset everything we've just discussed. Do you see a bull scenario at all for the economy?
Well, if the people that run the U.S., and the world still does revolve around the U.S., act the way Javier Milei is here in Argentina, yeah, sure. The world can recover and go to new heights of prosperity. It's possible, but very unlikely. You've got to remember that the average American voter, who I have no faith in at all, not only, they elect people like Clinton and that baby Bush, and then Obama, and then Biden, and Trump is no savior either. None of these people are well. I think your listeners should look into Javier Milei, but not in the popular press, because everything is distorted. He actually wants to uproot the Argentine government and sow Agent Orange in the ground from where it grew. So I think Argentina will boom, frankly, and I expect to profit from that. So can things get better? In other words, look, two things to remember to end this on a happy note. Prosperity comes from basically two things. One, every individual producing more than he consumes and saving the difference, because that savings is what you can invest to grow more wealth. And people are wired like squirrels to produce more than they consume and save the difference. The problem, of course, is that most of their savings are in fiat currency, so they're being destroyed. And that can kill that goose. But the second thing is technology. For the last couple of 100 years since the Industrial Revolution started, technology has been compounding upon itself almost at the rate of Moore's Law. And that's fantastic. That's wonderful. So hopefully that'll continue, as long as there's capital from savers to enable that. So yeah, and too much of that technology isn't controlled by the government to do really stupid things with, which is also possible. So yeah, the race is on, but I'm optimistic about the future for those two reasons.
No, fantastic. Doug, what a wonderful conversation. I really appreciate you joining us here on Soar Financially. Where can we follow your work? Where can we dive a little deeper into your mind here?
Okay, well, I appreciate that. Thanks, thanks, Carl. I have a YouTube channel called Doug Casey's Take, number one. I have a daily blog, which I think is quite good, actually, called internationalman.com. And I have 3 novels, Speculator, Drug Lord, and Assassin, that trace the history of a great fictional character called Charles Knight. So if you like novels, they're really fantastic, if I say so myself.
No, fantastic. Doug, again, it was a pleasure meeting you. First time we had the pleasure of chatting as well. Truly looking forward to meeting you in person one of these days here, maybe in one of the conferences or events. And thanks so much for your time. Hope to have you back soon to discuss, developments in the world economy and world markets here in the commodity space, of course, as well. Truly
Thanks.
appreciated it. And everybody else, thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I have. If you did, please leave a like, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel, because I know 80 to 85% of you watching are not subscribed. It helps us tremendously grow our audience, of course, but also reach a new audience, educate, inform. Again, this is not investment advice, as you know. It's all in the disclaimer below. You all know that it's an educational, informational program, but if it was valuable to you, please show some appreciation. It means a lot to us. And maybe leave a comment. Did we ask the right questions? What should we have asked instead? How are you positioned? And do you believe Bitcoin versus gold? Is that symbiotic? Are they fighting each other? Is the money all flowing into Bitcoin and not into gold? Vice versa? Let me know. Really curious your thoughts, because I try to use your comments in future conversations, of course, as well. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll be back with lots more here on Soar Financially.